as I was breaking down this top 50 list, it was a very definite, serious question for me as to which would come higher on the list, the Howmet TX or the Chaparral 2J. Now, I ultimately centered on the Howmet because my love for its engine in particular is so strong that it does justify for me putting it even higher, because the Howmet achieved in its field what the Chaparral was unable to achieve in its field. As brilliant as the 2J is, it didn't ultimately achieve its goal. It wasn't until 8 years later that the Brabham BT46B, which of course is also on this list, actually achieved the goal of having a fan-assisted victory. The Chaparral never did, because of reliability issues. This car, however, did achieve its goal. This is a race-winning car, and the reason why I have so much love for the Howmet isn't just because of its engine, because, spoiler alert, this is a gas turbine-powered race car, and any of you who have spent even a small amount of time on the channel will probably know I love gas turbines. I believe I've already mentioned that in this series. Spoiler alert, it's not the last time we're going to talk about them, and I love the engine. It's my single favourite engine type of all time. I love gas turbines. I love the sound, I love the advantages that they have. They're very physically small, they're much lighter, more often than not, than a traditional piston engine of an equivalent performance and power, and for their power, their performance goes way beyond the raw spec. If you compare a 350 horsepower piston engine to a 350 horsepower turbine engine, the kind of performance which the car or the bike or whatever the case may be will have is drastically different. Now, the Howmet is probably the most historically significant gas turbine powered car ever, and I would go so far as to say it probably always will be. And the reason why I would make that very strong statement is relatively simple. This is, to this day, the only gas turbine powered race car to ever win a race. And due to the fact that FIA rules, as well as pretty much any governing body of racing's rules, get tighter and tighter every year, it's highly unlikely, if not impossible, that a gas turbine powered race car will ever happen again, and even if it did, it would most likely only be a Garage 56 creation like the Delta Wing, and therefore, even if it did win the Le Mans, it still wouldn't be eligible as a victory, because it's an experimental category. So I would say there is a very likely chance, a 99% chance, maybe even higher, that there will never be another race-winning gas turbine-powered car. This is probably the only time it will ever happen. And that alone immediately skyrockets the Howmet to being in an extremely important position, because it occupies a place in the racing world that not many cars do. It's the only vehicle of its kind to win a race. There aren't many race cars that have that to their name, but funnily enough, the Brabham fan car, the BT46B, also of course on this list, that also holds that to its name. It's the only fan car to win a race, because the Chaparral, of course, never did. Now, the reason why this one kind of goes back and forth with me between this and the 2J, and that's the exact reason why I featured them so closely to each other on the list, is because of how much love I have for them both. Now, if you could rewrite history somehow and have these cars in a fictional, ideal world sort of way merge into one, I mean, first of all, imagine how that would look. Something that looks like a combination of the TX and the 2J, with a gas turbine-powered engine, or a gas turbine engine, and a ground effect fan. Imagine how awesome that would be. Of course, impossible, because Can-Am and Group 6 Endurance are considerably different things, but at the same time, that would be a pretty awesome race car. Potentially a closed-top 2J with a semi-blue paint job, or something like that. Now, this car's engine is what drew my attention to it in the first place, but the fact that it achieved its goal made me love it even more. Now, you can look up videos of the car on YouTube if you want to see it in action. There are cockpit cam views. I was actually fortunate enough to speak to the owner of one of them, and it's an incredible machine. It's a car that has, again, performance which goes way beyond the numbers. It's a roughly 350 horsepower car powered by a Honeywell turbine, and of all the types of racing that you'd probably intend to use a gas turbine for. Endurance is, well, really the last one that you'd think of. It's not exactly an endurance-friendly engine, because all vehicles that use it, even a helicopter, but it's not as much of an issue there, have to deal with the same issues. They use a huge amount of fuel, they produce a huge amount of heat, and they like to be worked at peak at all times. So when you put that into a car, those three issues are exponentially increased, because with a helicopter you are working at peak speed, so that eliminates that problem. Fuel usage is much more efficient at higher speeds with a turbine than start-stop driving, so again, a helicopter ironically is more efficient than when you put it in a car. And thirdly, the heating issue. A helicopter is in the air is a little bit thinner, at least at the height that you'd typically be flying, and it's going to be air-cooled as well, in a way that a car typically wouldn't be. So a helicopter itself works just fine. When you put it into a car, you get all of these issues, and even the Howmet did have some issues. The car did not run perfectly. They did have issues for sure, but it's a car which I haven't known about for quite as long as the Chaparral, but as soon as I found out about it and what its heart was, well, of course, I fell in love with it. And the fact that it's probably the only ever car to win a race, and probably always will be, well, that pretty much solidifies it as one of the most historically significant race cars of all time. I love the TX, and it certainly deserves a place, I think, as my absolute favourite race car of all time. But that's it for this pick overall. Of course, you can check out others in this series by clicking through at the end, but for now, as always, thanks for watching.